Afghanistan celebrates a major national holiday today, although not one that you and I could be expected to join in with. For the 15th of August marks 2 years to the day that Kabul fell to the Taliban takeover. After 20 years attempting to neutralise the Taliban threat, the US was forced into a humiliating withdrawal and evacuation with scenes reminiscent of the fall of Saigon. But what state is the country on which the US spent $1 trillion now in? The Taliban's promises to exert a softer rule have been broken, with girls' rights curtailed, a ban on female education, public executions obviously have resumed, and chants of, and I'm not joking now, death to the West, death to Europeans, and death to America took place outside the former US embassy today. Now, it appears that Britain and America's foreign policy objectives in the region have obviously failed. It's worth noting as well, I think, isn't it, that around 470 British soldiers lost their lives, several thousand, 7,500 actually, were injured, some desperately badly so. 111,000 Afghan civilians were killed, 64,500 Afghan soldiers were killed on top of all of that, and out of Afghanistan's population, around 5.7 million are now displaced. Has it worked? Was it worth it? Joining me now is London councillor Peymana Assad, who was in Kabul and forced to flee as the city fell. Thank you very much. Was it worth it?
I think that's an interesting question to be asking ourselves actually at this moment in time, especially considering that over the last 2 years we've seen a brutal Taliban regime in Afghanistan, all the things that you mentioned, the curtailing of women's rights, girls' rights, men and boys being under attack, killed, tortured, disappeared because they oppose Taliban rule. But I think the thing that gives me comfort and the thing that I think most Brits should try and remember is that over the last 20 years, girls went to school, women had the right to work, and men and boys were also had access to their rights. They worked very closely with the British Ministry of Defence, with the British Foreign Office, were trained actually at Sandhurst, many of these Afghan army officers. Do I think it was worth it? Yes. Do I think that it was the morally right thing to do to go into Afghanistan and get rid of the Taliban regime? Yes. Do I think that things could have been done differently? Yes. Do I think that we should have listened to Afghans and we should have understood that country in a different way? Yes. So I think that there was lots of things that went wrong, but I also think that lots of things went right. And I think that the blame really lies with the opening of the Taliban office in 2013 in Qatar. The blame lies with the US Taliban deal in February 2020. The blame lies with the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. I think that is the thing that we need to regret. That's the thing we need to look back on.
I mean, I don't doubt anything that you said there, by the way. A lot of people at the time were wondering why there wasn't more resistance to the Taliban from a lot of Afghan troops that we had trained. Your response to that?
So I think what we need to understand is that when President Biden set in the deadline for the withdrawal, the 31st of August 2021, with that he also told contractors who were supplying and fixing Afghan military equipment and helicopters, specifically those that were doing airstrikes against the Taliban across the country. The other thing is that the Taliban struck deals with tribal elders that was facilitated by the Pakistani intelligence service across the country. Pakistan's involvement in and interference in Afghanistan over the last 20 years is something that's not spoken about. And if you have a neighboring country that is providing, sourcing, funding a terrorist organization, it's really difficult. A guerrilla warfare, technically, it's really difficult for the Afghan army to continue to fight back when contractors pull out and those that you thought were your allies and that would stand by you, telling you to surrender and to not fight.
Just one last one, if that's all right, Peymana. The families of British soldiers who died over there, it's a mixed bag when you listen to their reactions now. A lot of them are very scathing about Tony Blair. What would you say to them if they are feeling as though actually they just wish we'd have never gone and that their son's life, was lost for nothing, really?
What I would say to them is that I obviously feel their pain and that their loss can never ever be replaced, but that the change that was brought to Afghanistan over the last 20 years was 100% worth it. It's why Afghan women are now on the streets of Kabul still resisting and protesting against the Taliban regime, why women are being tortured in Taliban prisons, why men and boys are being disappeared. It is because of that last 20 years intervention, that last 20 years support that we gave to the Afghan people.
Look, Peymana, thank you very, very much. Peymana Assad there, who was in Kabul, forced to flee as the city fell, giving her round up on, that question of the day, really, which was it all worth it?